One brilliant man, Mark Birkett. Birkett, a young Swiss engineer, arrived in Spain in 1899 and was soon involved in the embryonic car industry. The Hispano Suiza company was formed in 1904 with Birkett as chief engineer, and this very early 14-horsepower model drew on his early experiences. In 1909, urged on by the young King Alfonso of Spain, he built a new four-cylinder engine for the car. The following year, with a bigger engine, his star driver Zuccarelli won a prestigious coupe at Boulogne. The king, who was said to drive like a cannonball in a cloud of smoke, was delighted and gave his name to a new model, the famous Alfonso XIII, according to some authorities, the world's first true sports car. After the introduction of the Alfonso, Hispano's reputation for quality and elegance grew, and sales multiplied. By now, Birkett, totally dedicated to his work, had moved the company to a new factory in Spain and had opened a branch factory in Paris. The cars had become the darlings of the international set. The production in France grew until ultimately most Hispanos were being built there.
Yeah, we can't miss a real genuine stork. I'll get my camera because I want to shot of it.
Nesting storks have special significance for Hispano owners. The flying stork mascot is one of the most cherished and distinctive features of post-World War I cars, and this association with Hispano came about because in the run-up to the Great War, Birkett had switched his attention to designing a 150-horsepower aero engine, which was to influence aviation worldwide. Over 50,000 were built, and they powered many Allied planes, including those of French ace Georges Guinema, who used the stork as the symbol of his Spad squadron. The war was good for Hispano. A young company with a promising reputation had grown, thanks to their engine, into a powerful and respected organization employing over 4,000 people. The aircraft engines live on, but not just in restored aeroplanes. After the war, many drivers installed these 18.5-litre V8s in racing cars. And on the rally, John Old from Victoria in Australia turned up in just such a beast. Vibration had broken a strut, but with some help from a bewildered Spanish mechanic, a luggage strap was modified to hold the front wings together, and the car was soon back on the road.
Perfecto.
John revels in speed. He flies aeroplanes, he bought 2 Spad fighters while in Spain, and drives regularly in vintage car rallies. This fearsome car, straight out of Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, is so fast he could afford to leave a couple of hours behind everyone else and still be first at the bar in the evenings. His only problem was to find enough fuel to satisfy the beast's thirst, difficult at 10 miles to the gallon. But it's cars like these that won fame for Hispano on the track. And Sir Alistair Miller raced at Brooklands in a similar vehicle, powered by the Wolseley Viper version of the engine. By now, the rally was deep into Spain. On the sort of endless straights the great cars must have been counted in the 30s as they made their way across Europe on the Grand Tour. Ah, great days. But there were casualties. Roy Middleton.
What sort of condition was she in when you first got hold of her?
A complete wreck.
Yeah.
It was found on a farm in Cornwall with just the front half under a barn and the back end stuck in the open. The engine and gearbox was out and in boxes, and it looked a very sorry state.
Yeah.
In fact, I think it was the day I brought it home was our first divorce.
You do all your own restoring and...
Yes, I do. This car I restored over a period of 12 years. I have a chap comes in and helps me about 2 days a week, 2 or 3 days a week, and we do as much as we can in-house, machining of new parts, and most of the parts that wear out are the spare parts are worn out.
Yeah.
So you have to have them made, and most people go to a small engineering shop who specialise in one-offs, and have the part made for them.
Is this the largest number of them you've seen gathered together in one spot?
I think it's the largest number anybody has ever seen gathered together in one spot. Oh yes, this is a fantastic gathering.
Day 2 was to see the cars heading off through Rioja country and up into the Sierra for lunch at Soria, but only after an appropriate send-off. Lord Montague and daughter Mary were in the National Motor Museum's 1912 Alfonso, and relishing the challenge. With its long-stroke, four-cylinder, 3.5-litre engine, the car is still capable of over 65 miles an hour, or perhaps not. I mean, there was still half the rally to go. But as the gradient steepened out in the mountains, some of the cars were beginning to feel the strain. An H6 racer driven by Philippe Louton from France had already lost its engine, and he and his wife were forced to spend the rest of the rally as passengers. But Manuel Pestana from Vigo was out to show that his very early 1912 T15 Open Tourer was up to everything that Spain could throw at him. Bernard Paris from Tunbridge in Kent was simply wafting along in his 1921 H6 Tourer. Hardly surprising, for his power came from half a V12 aero engine, 6.5 litres of mechanical perfection. The H6 was unequalled from its launch in 1919 for its appearance, technology and matchless performance. Its four-wheel servo-assisted brakes were much admired, and even Rolls-Royce subsequently took out a licence on them. The chassis carried a variety of bodies, and thanks to the great flexibility of the engines, were capable of handling heavy coachwork. But the open Tourers, the cars of legend, they're the eye-catchers. This is a 1922 boat-deck torpedo body from Henri Labourdette, just one of the top coach builders who joined forces with Hispano to turn out some of the world's most elegant and occasionally outrageous designs. Lunchtime found the rally converging on Soria. For the drivers, a breather and a chance for another quick polish. On such a long run, it's not surprising that things had gone wrong. The Spanish contingent paused for a swift group discussion on the inner workings of a carburettor.
Això amb una mica de l'aldit de pasta d'aquella, una vegada muntat.
Of course, cars like these were designed to sweep up the gravel drives of mansions or slide to a halt in front of a grand hotel. Little thought was given to the problems the chauffeur might have had in parking the monsters. With heavy steering and even heavier clutches, low-speed maneuvering could be difficult.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. You're welcome.
The extreme flexibility of the engine can be easily demonstrated, and Louis Lescure derived much pleasure from watching people's faces as he just lifted the compression lever and let the magnificently maintained heart of his car tick over happily at under 100 revs per minute.
She doesn't want. She wants to rest.
But there's no rest for the ever-faithful band of pushers. The Quintanos are off again. And having a bit more luck as they set off with the rest of the convoy for Sigüenza than Tim Hewison, whose H6's pinion bearing had seized. The car was now on board the Grua, a backup truck trailing the rest of this exotic fleet.
This car, we don't really know who owned it in the early days. For a short time after the war, it was owned by Peter Ustinov. And I remember hearing that he said as he was driving along, he imagined there was a little Scottish chief engineer under the bonnet who kept on saying to him, "No so many revs, Mr. Ustinov."
Lieutenant Commander Maureen Scott, raconteur and former Hispano racer.
I had all mine in the 50s. My first one I bought for £45, the next two for £100, and the last one for £25. And then something went wrong, and I emigrated to Jamaica, and I ran out of money and crown wheel and pinions at the same time, and so I sold it for enough money to buy an Austin Princess and a Jeep, you know, even though it wouldn't go.
With the bells ringing out invitingly from the hilltop village of Medina Celi, it was decided it was time to take a break from the rally. The redoubtable commander, accompanied by the car's owner John Howell and society journalist Meredith Etherington Smith, just wandered contentedly. It must be siesta time, after which the commander, by his own admission, tends not to drive.
It's like, but it is like the end of the world, isn't it? Palazzo de las Duques de Medina. It's just it's a ducal palace.
Time to move on, and time to muse on the homecoming of this most prestigious mark.
You know, there's some pleasure in owning probably the finest motor car that's ever been made. The finest design, the best workmanship, everything that they did. I mean, in those days, it wasn't a question of throwing the thing together in a factory. They weathered the castings for 2 years before they actually machined them, and that sort of thing, you know. Nobody can afford to do that today. They were not cheap. A chassis in the 20s cost about £2,500. You took it to a bodybuilder, and he would charge you about £1,500 to put a body on. So that was about £4,000. And after all, in those days, you could buy a very nice house for £1,000, which today would perhaps cost you £100,000. So you're talking the equivalent of £400,000 in today's money. It's nice to see so many Hispanos join together. You know, the aim of this trip is to enjoy ourselves and drink as much as possible, I'm sure.
But what to drink? Sherry, of course. And what to talk about? Well, when buffs assemble, what else?
My father had this car in 1956.
You've had the car since 56?
My father bought it back then. And, this is my first car, and some of the other cars in my collection. This probably being my a Duesenberg, Packards, Ormonds, the Rolls Royce, the Bentley, Model A Ford, 57 Connell Mark II, a 32 Ford street rod.
The stopover in Sigüenza was taken within the walls of an 11th century castle, keep, crenellations and all. The locals had breached the portcullis and were swarming enthusiastically around this unlikely display, to the consternation of their proud owners. John Old had other matters on his mind.
These engines, the aircraft engines, were made just for sort of constant speed, not on, off, on, off. And when you take the foot off, it gets a load of oil and just fouls up the plugs every now and again. Just if you can get a decent burst, it'll come clean. But we're going into Madrid tomorrow, so I thought I'll give them a clean. There's 16 of them to do, that's the only thing.
Saturday morning, and the cars set off for the 80-mile drive into the capital. Most of the older cars were surviving remarkably well, but the Quintano's Alfonso, unrestored, let's be fair, had run into a number of mechanical problems. Elena and Juan maintained an air of calm dignity throughout, but they did seem destined to push the car all the way around Spain. On the outskirts of Madrid, I'd hitched a lift with Jean-Paul Dubroca, who's a pilot for Air France.
Do you find this more relaxing than piloting a 747?
Yes. Well, anyway, I'm never stressed.
How old is she?
This is from 1921.
Beautiful. And designed by a boat builder, I think. Was it when was this?
Yes, it's about like a boat.
Yeah. Was that done originally, or was it?
Yes, completely original.
Yeah. So somebody obviously enjoyed boating.
Yeah, it was restored to original condition.
Yeah.
Exactly the same color, everything is original.
With a police escort that tended to err more to enthusiasm than expertise, we made our grand entrance into the city. So that we didn't get lost, we hung on enthusiastically to the car ahead, and many a red light passed, imprudently behind us. The Quintano's Alfonso was up to his old tricks again. But they were determined not to be denied. And an exhilarating 30 minutes later, they and the rest of the caravan arrived at the Plaza Mayor. Who says the rain in Spain stays mainly on the plain?
Luis, tell me something of your beautiful, beautiful vehicle.
Well, what do you want to know?
Well, I can see it's
It was
1918.
It was born in 1918, really, in Barcelona.
Barcelona.
Yes. And this was one of the 2,000 cars built by Hispano Suiza of this modern size. It was built between 16 and 1924. It was running in a private family. It was sold to the public office of Bordius, I think.
The undertaker.
Undertaker, yes. Look at here. You will see, but very rarely, La Hispano Suiza Barcelona, because most of the bodies were not manufactured in the factory. The owner used to
Design his own?
design itself.
Yeah.
But this one was of the factory, originally from the factory. And still original. I must apologize because there's plenty of items, but you can see
That's original?
it's original. Everything is original. Everything is original. I must apologize again, but
No, don't.
that's just arriving. But and it was built in 1918, and this was the Lux model, and it's a transition between the old ones and the new H6 Paris 1920.
That is very beautiful.
Very beautiful.
Dashboard.
The dashboard,
Brass
yes.
and...
Yes.
Ah.
Everything.
It's the enthusiasm of people like Luis de Villa Cascante that makes the owners, as far as I'm concerned, as interesting as the cars themselves. They're all characters. And none more so than Louis Lescure.
Stop! Stop! You have no idea.
Is it okay?
You have no idea.
Is it okay?
How has it been for you so far then, monsieur? Au moment, BBC, ici. How was your trip into Madrid? I'm surprised to see you here.
Qu'est-ce qu'il me raconte? Moi, je comprends rien.
Oh mon Dieu.
Qu'est-ce que c'est que ce baragouin qui raconte?
Ça va, là.
Il est quoi exactement comme origine?
Ça va, le trip à Madrid pour vous,
Hey, tu
monsieur.
peux pas parler comme tout le monde, non?
God, it's going to be hell in
Il
1992.
suffit de parler comme tout
Well,
le
we're all
monde.
going to have to talk like this in 1992. I mean, there are people
Il est
looking forward
gentil.
to it.
Il est gentil. You mean that you don't want any more the channel? The
Let me help you down, poor foreigner. How old is this fine creature then? When was this built?
The body was built in 1929, beginning 1929.
And how long have you owned it?
I had it for now 35 years. It's a very old love affair.
It seems to be with everybody.
Yeah. In my case, yes.
It is passion, isn't it?
Because I discovered it, the value was zero. I found it a day before the scrapyard owner was coming to the garage and taking the car to the scrapyard.
How long did it take you to put it together again?
I was lucky enough to find the man, the only man in charge of Hispano car in France after the war. And this car, in other words, this car has never been touched by any mechanist who was not a specialist of Hispano.
Sunday, for the majority of the inhabitants of this elegant and historic city, is traditionally a day of rest. But for the patrons of the Hotel Ritz, it's the day of the concours d'élégance. And from early morning, polishing and preening were very much in evidence. And as the good Lord Montague marshalled all the participating Alfonsos into line for a commemorative photograph, I managed a word with Jim Sandy, whose car had been shipped from the other side of the world, especially for this event.
I see, James, you replaced the rather more traditional bird with a slightly less traditional kookaburra from Australia.
Well, originally we had a kangaroo, but whenever you opened the bonnet, the tail got in the road, and it has a little Australian flavour. That's the reason for the kookaburra.
A massive Australian flavour. How did you come by the car?
Well, the car was belonged to a family called the McPhillamy family, and they had a fire. We said, well, that's the end of the car. But being in the country, you've got no place to throw it away. So they pushed it over into the Lachlan River. But it was freshwater, so it was 20 years not worn out. So there was very little to do to it mechanically. There was a little interesting thing when they brought it out of the river. Because of all the big holes in the engines that you find in engines, there was a family of frogs. And they'd got fat in there and they couldn't get out. They were living, that's where they were. They couldn't get out of the engine until it was taken to bits.
As the great moment neared, the last touches were added, and the elegance was much in evidence. No car buff eye, but clearly the atmosphere was getting to me. I mean, I couldn't resist adding a touch or two of my own. The excitement mounted, but for some, the tension was obviously starting to show.
Hey! Go!
You go to the tent and you smile for about 15 seconds. 15 seconds. You look at your watch and then you move on round, which is telling you exactly what you know. Lovely.
A few final instructions and the concours was underway. This 1906 T3040 Tourer was the oldest car in the event. Noted in its day for the unique construction of the engine and gearbox, it was driven by Fausto Saavedra, president of the veteran division of the Auto Club of Spain, who had brought it into the rally just for the day.
Centímetros cúbicos y es de los conocidos por modelo torpedo. 4 es un modelo de 1912, también modelo Alfonso XIII.
So now there were 40 cars and over 80 passengers, all fully entering into the spirit of the thing and putting on the Ritz.
Obsérvense la gracia del abanico. Muchas gracias.
The winner of the concours was finally judged to be Jim Hull from Los Angeles in the US of A. The co-owner is exotic 1935 Cabriolet. Beautifully appointed in every way. The gala dinner that evening, to celebrate the laying of the foundation stone upon which this regal pile was built, was traditionally presented in both its music and cuisine. And some of us were moved to join in. Olé. Then, the festivities over, it was back to the realities of the long drive home. Passing the magnificent palace at El Escorial and climbing into the mountains, there were mixed fortunes. Celebrating his most popular award for tenaciously working a 14-hour stint with his wife and 2 local mechanics to overcome his earlier engine problems, a triumphant Tim Hewison pulled in to enjoy the view. Meanwhile, Jules Human, president of the Hispano Suiza Society of America, no less, had realized what was hampering his progress.
Not charging. Yeah, the next stop I'll regulate the voltage regulator so it'll come up. Okay. Gentlemen, I thank you very much. Without you, without BBC...
Faithfully trailing the caravanserai, the Gruyere was soon to come into its own. Mary Montague, now at the wheel of the family Alfonso, was in big trouble.
Oh, well.
Bad. Ja, yes, is it?
But just what was the problem?
The valves, making a really horrible noise about sort of a couple of miles back, and so we thought we'd stop and have a look, and it's getting really bad, so we thought we'd stop, and then luckily the mechanics came along and just in time and listened in and said, oh no, it's not good, and somebody else stopped and said, no, it's not good, you shouldn't carry on, we'll try and fix it tonight. Perhaps someone will have a spare, I'm not mechanical, a spare part, yeah, don't know any more than that. Just hope they can do their best.
The part turned out to be a big end, and further maintenance would have to be deferred until the car could be returned home to Bewley. But running repairs were sufficient to get Senor Pierre's 1925 H6 back into the rally, a relief for the Argentinian, and for the exuberant Hulls who were soon powering on towards the night stop at Tordesillas. Infectious joie de vivre, coupled with the ability to sweep grandly across the plains of Europe, unleashed within me a quiver of desire, perhaps to join the Hispano-owning elite. But how difficult would that be? I intercepted Charles Howard.
Charles, most of the souls here, 99% probably, are enthusiasts, pure and simple, but you are actually trade.
I'm trade, yes, beyond the pale.
You deal in these?
I deal in them.
Tell me once more, first of all, are there any yet undiscovered Hispanos somewhere halfway up a mountain in Bolivia or anything like that?
I would think very, very few. Maybe 1 or 2 lurking in the odd chateau in France, but the chance of finding a Hispano Suiza in a barn are about as good as finding a Goya in a junk shop in Southend.
So how, therefore, are we going to come across one?
You'd read the specialist magazines, study the top dealers, and subscribe to the catalogue of the auctioneers. I always boast that my spy network, which enables me to find cars, is slightly better than the CIA network, in as much as I make fewer boobs than they do, and I find, you know, it's a more successful espionage service, put it that way, dollar for dollar, my espionage service, which is you know, works day and night, and I get phone calls and faxes and telexes and whispers in the ear, and that's how it works. It's what's now known as networking, and used to be called contact.
Somebody somewhere knows that you will want to know, and he'll say, I have seen this.
And the more you buy, the more you're offered.
Well, Peter Briggs has been offered and has bought over 150 classic cars.
It's like the Mille Miglia.
Yes. I love it, don't they?
This beautifully restored Alfonso is from his collection back home in Australia, and is one of his favourites. It must be. He had it flown here in a jumbo jet. It was originally owned by a fire chief in Victoria, who, hearing of the car's sporting performance, bought it so he could get to the fires first. Another car a long way from home was this 1934 Cabriolet, owned by Knox Kershaw from Alabama.
This is the first time you've been to Europe, isn't it?
The first time for a tour in Europe in an antique, in a classic car.
You enjoying it?
Oh yes, we've had a great time. Except for the few problems.
What sort of troubles have you had?
Well, we had a problem with I thought it was originally something in the gearbox, but actually a washer, probably a 10-cent item, gave way, and it caused a nut to come loose, and all the gears and the clutch and everything shifted forward, which meant I had problems with shifting gears and then with the clutch. So we had to take everything apart to fix it.
Rumour had it. You had several mechanics sent over by Concord from Alabama, specially charged. How much truth is there to this rumour?
Well, we had just one from Kansas.
Oh, that's not so bad. And not on Concord?
No, no.
Oh, are you as involved in all this as Knox, or you just go along in sufferance?
Well, he takes me to the good shows. He saves the good ones for me. So I relax and I let him do the driving.
And so to the final stage of an event that become not so much a rally, more a grand tour. As the cars toiled through the hills around Cervera de Pisuerga, there was a mounting sense of satisfaction. Even elation. The Olds, characteristically sweeping through the tail-enders, sped on towards an evening of drinks, speeches and farewell celebrations, followed by the Gruar, now also carrying a final casualty, James Panier's K6, which had retired with a shattered rear-end pinion. However, the great majority of these cars, all built more than 50 years ago, had completed 7 days exhilarating motoring without any problems at all. Driven with tremendous enthusiasm and elan, the Silver Storks had returned home, providing a fitting tribute to the genius of the Swiss engineer Mark Burkitt and of his adopted country, a land of music, wine, sunshine, and the Hispano Suiza.